Welcome to City Life. I'm Beverly Thompson. With the passage of the $95 million affordable housing bond in November of 2019, Durham voters made a commitment to making affordable housing for city residents a priority. That money is being combined with other local and federal funding for a total of $160 million to support the city's affordable housing investment program. While implementation of the program has been slowed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, work is well underway toward achieving that goal. Joining me to talk about what those goals are, how they're being achieved, and how Durham's public housing fits into the scope of the plan's funding is Reginald Johnson. He is the Director of the Community Development Department for the City of Durham. Also joining us is Anthony Scott. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Durham Housing Authority. Thanks to you both for joining me.
Thank you.
Reginald, I've been looking forward to this show, and I know I've asked you this before. Tell us exactly what is meant by affordable housing, because what's affordable for you might not be affordable for me or another person. So exactly how do you define it?
Oh, that's a good question, Bev, and thank you so much for having us here. I'd first like to, and that's a frequent question that I receive. The first thing that I'd like to say is that affordable housing is safe, decent housing that's affordable for low-income households. Low income is defined as being at or below 80% of the area median income for a specific geographical area. In our case, that's Durham and Chapel Hill. And to give a specific reference point, for a family of four, it's a household income of $72,700 a year. And a family of one is $50,900.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
As a general rule, households should not pay more than 30% of their pre-tax income for housing-related expenses such as rent and utilities or mortgage, utilities, insurance, and property taxes. And believe it or not, since most low-income households pay more than 30% of their household, their income in household and housing costs, some even actually pay over half. The Durham community made it a priority to create more affordable housing.
Mm-hmm. So 30% of your income is a magical
that's correct.
Number that you're looking for most of the population.
Yes, and if it's more than that, you're considered overburdened with housing costs. And like I said, there are many, unfortunately, in Durham that pay over 50% of their income in housing costs. Mm-hmm. That's one of the challenges that we're here to meet.
I hear you. Okay. So, Anthony, let's talk about the role of the Durham Housing Authority in providing public housing in Durham.
Sure. Well, one of the things I certainly want to clear up is let's talk a little bit about who DHA is. We're often thought of as being an agency of the city, but we're not. We are a state-chartered, federally funded, quasi-government nonprofit, which means essentially that no money from the city of Durham goes towards our ongoing operations and maintenance costs and things like that. Those funds actually come from the federal government, and we get those funds on an annual basis, and we never know from year to year how much funding we're actually going to receive. Additionally, as just about everyone knows, we are a provider of deeply affordable housing in Durham. So no matter what your income is, you pay, as Mr. Johnson was saying, you pay no more than 30% of your income towards your rent when you are a public housing resident or you're a holder of a housing choice voucher. And then lastly, our overall mission is to develop, own, and manage affordable housing in Durham.
Mm-hmm. So, Anthony, if I might ask, who actually determines how much any housing authority gets from year to year?
It is determined by Congress. So each year, Congress, when they go through their budgeting process, they determine how much money is going to be set aside for housing authorities nationally, and then that money is dispersed to all housing authorities. And one thing I'll mention is that we are fortunate in that Congressman David Price is the chair of the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Subcommittee that actually determines what our budgeting is.
So that's helpful to have someone pinch hitting for us. So,
Exactly.
from the city's perspective, what are the top priorities of the investment plan that we mentioned earlier, and how does the city plan to achieve them?
So one of the things that we're tracking, we have some key goals. And the first goal is to build 1,600 affordable housing units and preserve 800 affordable rental units. That's goal number one. And then we also want to move 1,700 homeless individuals and households to permanent housing. We also want to provide 400 affordable housing home ownership opportunities to first-time home buyers. And we want to help 3,000 low-income renters and home buyers remain in or improve their houses, the houses from which they live in now. Those are the key cornerstone goals that we have. And we also want to work with DHA, nonprofits and for-profit developers, as well as the community organizations that work in the area of affordable housing.
Okay, all righty. So let's bring this together then. So how does the city and the Durham Housing Authority actually work together on this goal of making sure that Durham's residents have access to good quality housing that they can afford?
So I'll take the first answer at that question, and then maybe Scott Anthony can chime in. But one of the things that's important is that we provide the gap financing for the buildings that the Housing Authority needs to redevelop. One of the things that's important is that the Housing Authority have the resources to engage in their conversion from to rental assistance demonstration program, and he can talk about that. But the role is that for the cities that we provide the gap financing for them to be partner with and pair with other organizations and other funding sources. And that's the role that we play. And that's an important role.
All right. Anthony, would you like to add to that?
Sure. One of the things that we're doing is looking at the tool of rental assistance demonstration, or RAD as we affectionately call it. It is a way for housing authorities to access financing tools and programs that we wouldn't normally be able to do. Mm-hmm. And through that, we've been able to take on renovation, for example, of Daymar Court, Maureen Road, Laurel Oaks, and some other properties. We've already started this, and we're doing just straight renovation of those buildings utilizing that RAD program. And here's the key thing about the RAD program. Remember I talked about our funding comes from Congress, and it has definitely been up and down, mostly down over the years. Well, the public housing program is funded by a separate fund. And then there's something called the Housing Choice Voucher, which is funded by a different fund. The RAD program essentially allows housing authorities to switch their source of funding from the old traditional public housing source to the more stable, generally funded at 100% Housing Choice Voucher program. This gives us the stability that we need that we haven't seen in decades. The other thing about that, when we use the RAD program, we're allowed to seek bank financing. And one of the real critical tools for us to be able to redevelop our properties is called the Low-Income Housing Tax Program. That essentially allows us through a tax financing scheme, which I won't get into, is very complicated so to try to explain, but essentially allows private sector investors to contribute funding to our public housing communities without having any direct role in how those properties are managed or without changing how those properties are actually remaining affordable. So the rents don't go up, which is some of the things that you hear about. People don't get kicked out. We're not allowed to convert it to market rate housing. Things of that nature are not allowed under the RAD program.
Mm-hmm. So it gives you a lot more options for upkeep of the property. And
it does.
Affordable, of course.
Well, yeah, it exactly allows you to invest the necessary capital money to either renovate those properties, or in the case of when we talk about the downtown area, allows us to tear down or rebuild. So it's an extremely exciting program, and it's going to create the kind of stability that our public housing communities have not seen since they were initially conceived.
That's important. Now, you mentioned downtown. I know you've been working on a plan, a neighborhood plan. It's called the Downtown and Neighborhood Plan for some time.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit more about how that works or what it is?
Sure. We call it the DHA, Downtown and Neighborhood Plan, or DDNP. And essentially what that is a very aggressive opportunity for us to renovate the 447 units that are located in the downtown area.
Mm-hmm.
That's over 4 different public housing communities, but we're combining that with other sites. We're looking at 2 sites that are owned by the city, 1 site that's owned by the county, plus the DHA sites that it currently owns. This is a 10-year program that will allow us to go from 447 units to over 2,500. And the overwhelming majority of those will be affordable housing in the type of affordability that Reginald spoke about earlier. It allows a different variety of incomes. And one of the key things about why this mixed income approach is so important is it allows us to bring in higher income from rents. So people at different tiers are going to pay different rent amounts. That's going to bring financial stability to these developments, which we don't currently enjoy. We will not be as reliant on the federal funding, but we'll have a mix of some federal funding, some rents that'll be higher, and also the subsidy we get from the low-income housing tax program, and of course, the very critical gap funding that Reginald spoke of earlier from the bond that was recently passed in November of 2019.
Mm-hmm. So, well, what are some of the challenges that you're facing with that? And I know this plan is meant to help you address some of those challenges.
Sure. I mean, clearly our biggest challenge is how we maintain our properties over time. Mm-hmm. And when you look at our properties as old as McDougal, which was built in the 1950s, to even J.J. Henderson, which was built in the 60s, remember I talked about how we've had this inconsistent funding over the years. Right. So that inconsistent funding translates into a very key number. HUD did a study back in 2010, and the results of that study says that when you look at where we are today, we are $60 billion, over $60 billion in underfunding over the last several decades. And that's looking at funding across the country of all public housing communities. And so what that says is that we as housing authorities, by HUD's own admission, have never received enough money to properly maintain our properties. So instead of doing replacement of major systems, we're doing repairs to major systems. And so over time, those repairs become more and more frequent, but you're not solving the core issue of we need to replace all the plumbing or all the electrical or all the roofs and those sorts of things. We simply have not received enough money to deal with that. The DDNP and the RAD program overall allows us to get that larger capital infusion for either a renovation of a property, such as what we're doing with J.J. Henderson, which is our first property in the DDNP, or a tear down and rebuild, which allow us not only to preserve those housing units, but to add more. I mean, we're actually increasing the number of affordable housing units in the downtown core. That was one of the primary objectives here. And, you know, some people say, well, why select the downtown area? Why not some of our other properties? The low-income housing tax credits, which are the primary financing vehicle for these deals, there are 2 types. There's a non-competitive one and there's a competitive one. The competitive one allows you to get nearly twice as much money, but it is competitive. In order for you to be successful at that competitiveness, you have to have certain amenities in and around those sites. Our downtown properties are the best qualified sites to be able to get those low-income housing tax credits. We applied for one for our J.J. Henderson new construction, and we were unsuccessful. We applied for a second for our site that's at Liberty and East Main Street, and we were successful. So the competition is real, but you have to be in an area that's going to be competitive with that state funding process.
I see. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, Reginald, getting back to the bond referendum, residents made it clear that affordable housing is very important to them. What has been the progress that we've made so far on the bond referendum?
Well, Beverly, just like all organizations and households, we've been impacted by COVID-19. But I'm pleased to report that we have made progress, though it has been slow. It has caused some delays in the implementation, but despite the delays and despite the setbacks, we've continued to make progress this in 2020 and are well positioned to make progress in 2021. In 2020, for example, the city supported programs by community agencies like Volunteers for America, Urban Ministries of Durham, Families Moving Forward, Housing for New Hope, and Project Access, all with the goal of providing residents with safe, affordable housing. On the multifamily front, in terms of development, we issued an RFP, and we're going to have new construction and rehabilitation of J.J. Henderson with the in 519 Main Street, which is formerly the Oldham Towers, also Liberty Street. And we've set up a committee, a citizens committee called Affordable Housing Implementation Committee, which will oversee the spending and advise the Community Development Department on the implementation of the investment plan. And Mayor Shuler appointed Diane Katati and Tiffany Elder to serve as co-chairs of that committee. So they'll begin a meeting in this month. And so the important part to know is that there are things that are going on. And for those who want to learn more, just can be found on the city's website. We've been able to make some progress despite COVID-19.
Good, good. Anthony, can you talk a little bit about how the Affordable Housing Investment Program priorities were selected for you all and how this will work to help address the challenges that you mentioned before?
Sure. Think about where we were in 2016. We looked, as I mentioned earlier, we looked at what is going to be most competitive for us for that key piece of financing. But think about what was happening in 2016. The light rail was being considered, and the light rail stops were within 15 minutes of each of our downtown targeted sites. We had 300 units of senior housing in the downtown core, well over 100 units of family housing in the downtown core. And by looking at those properties, thinking about the qualifications for the low-income housing tax credit program, if we were just doing renovations, such as we've done at Maureen Road or Daymar Court, we weren't going to be adding new housing units. And that downtown core is important that we, number one, preserve those 447 public housing units that are there. They will not go outside of that downtown area. They're going to remain there with all of our redevelopment efforts. And number two, we get to add another 1,900 units of housing on those same sites. So this is why we selected those particular sites in the downtown area. We think this model is going to be key for our larger sites, such as, what we look to do to McDougal Terrace or Oxford Manor, is that you've got to be able to increase the number of affordable housing units by taking advantage of your larger sites. And the key thing here we have to keep in mind is that clearly the downtown sites were and are the most valuable land that we have. So we can leverage the resources that we earn from the development of those sites to invest into our other communities throughout, which are going to be much more difficult to bring together development partners and development financing.
Okay, all righty. So Reginald, how is the city planning on spending the total of $160 million investment over the next 5 years? And if you could, please explain how that spending will be a catalyst for additional monies into the city. And I've read that it will make it a more than $600 million investment overall.
Oh, yes, definitely, Beverly. So in terms of the spending of the $160 million, there are 5 basic categories that we'll be spending. And the first one is multifamily rentals, and then that includes the work that's with DHA and as well as city-funded creation of multifamily housing. That's number one. Then we also will be engaging in work in neighborhood stabilization. And then, of course, one of the things that's dear to my role and my heart is the work that we do with ending homelessness, which is very important. So that's the third area. And then we're going to have some financing pilots that we're going to experiment with new financing structures, affordable housing cost. And we need different models to be able to achieve these goals. And then there's some basic program operations that we'll be engaged in. So those are the 5 areas. City Council approves the budget, and the CD, the Community Development Department, directs the funds to the service providers and provides a financial assistance to new homeowners and for building and preservation.
Okay. Anthony, let's talk a little bit about what I think many viewers have seen and on TV, if they watch the news, the condition of some of the DHA properties like McDougall Terrace, and they're not included in the city's 5-year investment plan. Why weren't these properties included? I think you may have touched on it, but how will the city's investments still help address those kinds of concerns?
Well, first, let me just say, let's think about pre-pandemic where we were with repairs. We were certainly behind in our repair work, our backlog of repairs. The numbers were not as high as they are now, but we were behind. Then we were hit with the McDougall Terrace CO emergency, and that took 4 months for us to resolve. And during that time, March is when the pandemic hit. And during that time, that's when we stopped all non-emergency work orders because we had to get our PPE together, make sure our staff could be safe, make sure we can keep our residents safe. And so that ended up pushing us even further behind with our work orders. Now, during all of this time, we've been working hard to sort of retool that property management area because we were not satisfied with how it was delivering its services to our residents. And then we had to battle these two major issues at the same time. So here's where we are today. We are increasing staffing, making sure that we're hiring qualified staff. So we've stepped up some things in terms of how we assess hirees. We're also bringing in additional contractors to help us get caught up. And then once that caught up is done, we deal with our backlog, our existing staff should be able to maintain the work orders that are being generated going forward. One of the things with the RAD conversion to these properties is that we're taking a lot of that burden of making sure that these properties are well maintained. We're taking that away because we're not dealing with that long backlog. We're not dealing with that historic underfunding. We're able to build new units or do a substantial renovation like we're doing with J.J. Henderson. J.J. Henderson, which is 177 units, is $16 million worth of renovation that's going on in that building, which would be from top to bottom. We would not be able to afford to do that had we not used the RAD program. There's no way we'd have $16 million. We didn't even have that much money in our capital fund for all properties, let alone just for one. So the approach that we're taking will allow us to convert other capital funds that we have towards the rest of our portfolio and bring those properties up. While at the same time, we're still working on very aggressive ways to either fully renovate or redevelop our other sites. Now, in the meantime, we're going to play catch up with those back orders, making sure that we have better systems in place, including some technology upgrades that we're doing so that we can better serve our residents. We are in no way satisfied with what people have seen on the news and what our residents are dealing with, and we're working very hard with them. We have a very special project right now we're doing with Hoover Road residents that will become a model for how we can do this across all of our portfolio, which involves inspections of the units, doing repairs, and having a more direct dialogue with each of our resident communities so that we can have a better sense of what's actually happening within those communities themselves.
Well, sounds like a huge job with so many moving parts.
It has been, yes.
Yeah. So Reginald, I know a key component to making the implementation of the investment plan a success overall is certainly partnerships like you have with DHA. And I'm sure you have some with other agencies, private developers, and even between the city and its residents. What are partnerships opportunities that are or will become available as the plan is carried out?
Good question, Beverly. The program is designed to have a significant impact on affordability and serve as a catalytic public investment that will create opportunities for the private sector and nonprofit sector in attracting funds and creating jobs and accomplishing more than any one single entity can do. Development present a concept, a project concept, and a financing plan. And what we do, as I mentioned earlier, is provide the gap financing for that to make it viable. What other entities are also looking for is whether the city is committed to a project. Once they see the city is, then other financing will come in to make a project complete. This is, as an example, the city recently issued a request for proposals, or RFP, we call them short, to support multifamily affordable rental housing, and it's for new construction and preservation. And we actually are going to commit up to $13 million for 5 projects, creating 230 affordable rental units and preserving 14 existing units over the next 2 to 3 years as those projects underway. City funding is absolutely critical because many of the funding sources are in need of other funding, and we can serve as a cornerstone that is leveraged. And that's how you can, once you leverage that funding, you can come up with, much more money than what you initially needed. And that's where the $600 million investment comes in.
Very well explained. Thank you for that. So, Anthony, what kind of reaction have you had from housing authority communities to the work that is being done as a part of the city's investment?
Well, I think if you look at the very first phase of this, which is J.J. Henderson, that is in its very early stages now. And honestly, we had a bit of a misstep. So we had a number of families that were being relocated, and we didn't handle that relocation well enough. We didn't communicate thoroughly as we should have. We didn't start early enough, and we didn't saturate the communication throughout. And so that was an important lesson for us learned as we move forward. Residents are excited about the opportunity to have the building completely renovated, but it's the little things that are going to be important along the way. And this was an important lesson for us as we get to moving more and more families for the work that happens. So we're going to make sure that we oversaturate with communication, stay in close contact with our residents, and make sure those missteps don't happen again. The other thing is that there's still a persistent rumors about things that are supposed to happen because we're doing this. One of the rumors is rents are going to go up once we go through RAD conversion. People will not be able to move back. We're not even going to have public housing in these communities anymore. It's just all going to be turned over to market rate housing because we have private sector partners. And the truth is that under the RAD program, it is codified in the law that rents will still be based on 30% of your income, just as they are now. Residents who are in those properties will have the first right to return of the new units that we build. And that we, under no circumstances, will be able to raise rents to some market rate level that just simply is not allowed in the law. And also relocation is another concern. But all those things are signed off on by HUD in order for us to move forward. The United States Department of Housing and Urban Development is watching every single RAD deal nationally as well as here in Durham, and they will not allow us to do those things that the rumor mill seems to keep churning up, even if we wanted to. Not that we are interested in that. And so I think when you combine that plus our commitment to make sure that all 447 units will remain in the downtown area, you will see that what we're proposing is a way to not only preserve, as I talked about earlier, but also to increase the amount of affordable housing that we'll have in the downtown area.
Let's see, I know residents will be glad to hear that. So Reginald, as you move forward with the Affordable Housing Investment Program over the next 5 years, how will you publicly track how the money is spent? And where can residents look for relevant updates and information and points of input even?
Well, Beverly, that's a very important question, and we understand the importance of this to Durham residents, both for those who need affordable housing and those whose votes made this affordable housing investment possible. And I just want to let everyone know that you can count on us for a steady beat of communication about progress as we go forward. The city is committed to open communication and transparency on the availability of RSPs that'll be listed on the city's website. but we know that websites and digital communication is only one part of communication. And so when we acknowledge that, so one of the things that we're going to do in addition to having a more robust website is that we'll be also having frequently asked questions and some community engagement as well, some face-to-face, COVID, as we work through COVID, but it still doesn't, stop us from being able to engage citizens. And we've done some of that already to get their input, to get their feedback, and to communicate information as best we can.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I do want to add that the spending reports and the progress reports will be put on the website. And so we will make that clear and available.
Mm-hmm. So your goal is to be as transparent as possible with everything that's going on as a part of this overall investment plan.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, we covered a lot. Is there anything else either of you would like to add?
Actually, I do have one other thing that I think was important in our work with this. Very early on in the process, we wanted to make sure that this was not just a development deal, but this was a jobs opportunity as well. So we have something called the DHA Shared Prosperity Plan, which we're doing in partnership with the city's Community Development Department and Office of Workforce and Economic Development. And it's geared towards two primary things. One, to try to make sure that our DHA residents and residents of our communities are getting available jobs in the construction area. And then two, to make sure that Durham-based contractors are getting a fair shot at being able to do work on these developments as well. So those are two key things that we're going to continue to push and promote. And if there are organizations or businesses that are interested, to please contact our office as we are putting together our resource list for our contractors, for our general contractors, so that they can be in touch with them about opportunities for them to have contracts with the development of this work.
Thank you for that. Reginald, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Yes, I would, Beverly. The most important thing, I want to encourage everyone to look at the website to keep updated on all of the progress that we're making. And the most important thing that I would want to close with is that our goal is to make Durham affordable, livable, and inclusive for everyone. And so that's the point of all of the work that we're doing. So thank you so very much for giving us this opportunity.
Oh, thank you very much. Well said. And thank you both again for coming here to talk about this very important topic. Well, that does it for City Life. Don't forget to follow us on social media, watch us on the Durham Television Network and on YouTube, and listen to our podcast on iTunes. I'm Beverly Thompson. Thank you for joining me to learn more about City Life in Durham.